never liked driving at night. There's something about the dark highway that always unsettled me, even as an adult. It's not the kind of fear you can explain away easily either. It's that quiet voice in the back of your head that whispers, "You're not as alone as you think." But I never listened to that voice until it was too late. This happened about a year ago, in late October. The nights had started to get colder, the kind where your breath fogs up the air even before winter sets in. I'd gone to help a friend move into his new apartment in a small town about an hour and a half from where I lived. We spent most of the day hauling boxes and furniture, then spent the evening eating greasy pizza and watching movies. By the time I left, it was well past midnight. Normally, I would have crashed on his couch, but I had to be at work early the next morning. I told myself I could handle the drive. I'd done it before. It was just one long stretch of highway through farmland, then back into familiar suburbs. The first thing that made me uneasy was the gas gauge. The needle was a little too close to empty for comfort. I told myself I'd be fine. I knew there was one 24-hour gas station about halfway along the route. Sure enough, 20 minutes into the drive, I spotted the flicker of fluorescent lights up ahead. The gas station looked deserted, the kind of place you'd expect to see in a horror movie. The lot was cracked, weeds poking through. The sign buzzed and flickered. Half the letters burnt out, so it just read gas and go with the O barely holding on. I pulled up to the pump, got out, and started filling my tank. The air was so still it made me uneasy. There weren't even crickets, just the faint hum of the pump and the buzzing of that broken sign. When I went inside to pay, the clerk barely looked at me. He was an older man with tired eyes, leaning against the counter like he'd been there for decades. I tried to make small talk. "Quiet night?" I asked. He looked at me for a long moment before answering. Too quiet. His voice was low, gravelly. Then he added, "You be careful out there. People go missing on this road." I laughed nervously, thinking he was just making conversation. "Missing? Huh?" He didn't laugh. He just stared at me until I muttered thanks, paid, and left. I told myself he was just some weird old guy trying to spook me. But as I got back into the car, I couldn't shake the way he'd said it, like he wasn't warning me out of kindness, like he already knew what was coming. I drove on, trying to shake the unease. The highway stretched into darkness, my headlights carving out a narrow tunnel of visibility. Fields on either side, empty and endless. Every so often, a cluster of trees, their bare branches clawing at the night sky. I fiddled with the radio, but all I got was static. Even when I switched to a local station I usually picked up, it was just faint whispers, almost like voices buried beneath the static. I turned it off quickly, the silence somehow preferable. That's when I saw her. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, just a shape on the side of the road. But as I got closer, the shape became clear. A woman stood on the shoulder facing the highway. She didn't wave, she didn't step forward. She just stood there, arms limp at her sides, long dark hair hanging over part of her face. She wore a pale dress that looked far too thin for the cold night. Everything in me screamed, "Don't stop." My dad's words echoed in my head, "It only takes one." But then my mom's voice pushed through, "What if she really needs help?" I slowed down. As my car rolled to a stop, I lowered the window just enough to speak. "Hey, are you all right? Do you need a ride?" She turned her head toward me slowly, like it took effort. Her face was pale, almost sickly, her eyes glassy but fixed directly on me. "I need a ride," she said softly. The words were simple, but the tone, flat, emotionless, like she was reading them from a script. I hesitated. My hand hovered over the lock button. My better judgment told me to drive away, but guilt and nerves made me unlock the door instead. She opened it and slid in without a word. No thanks, no explanation. She folded her hands in her lap and stared straight ahead. That was when the smell hit me. Damp, earthy, like wet soil, and something faintly metallic, like rust. I tried not to gag, forcing myself to focus on the road. "So, where are you headed?" I asked, hoping to break the silence. She turned her head slightly, just enough for me to see her lips. "I've been waiting," she whispered. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Waiting for what?" She didn't answer. She just turned back toward the windshield. I laughed awkwardly, trying to shake the tension. "Well, you're in luck, I guess." But she didn't respond. The longer she sat there, the more wrong it felt. People fidget, They scratch their face, adjust their clothes, shift in their seat, but she sat perfectly still like she wasn't even breathing. And then, faintly, she started humming. It was soft at first, barely audible over the tires, but it made the hair on my arms stand on end. The melody was slow, old, almost like a lullaby. I gritted my teeth, trying to ignore it, but it grew louder, louder. I glanced at her lips. They weren't moving. My stomach dropped. I pulled the car onto the shoulder, heart pounding. "Okay, I think this is where I let you out." I reached for the hazard lights and froze. Her head snapped toward me, not turned, snapped, like her neck bent too fast. Her mouth stretched into a wide grin, too wide, showing teeth that looked sharp in the glow of the dashboard. "You don't get to stop," she hissed. The engine cut out. The lights died. The night swallowed us whole. I twisted the key desperately, but the car wouldn't start. My breaths came quick and shallow. Then I saw it, in the reflection of the windshield. Her face inches from mine, smiling. But when I turned, she was still sitting in the passenger seat, perfectly still. I shoved the door open and stumbled out, the cold air burning my lungs. I backed away from the car, hands trembling. The passenger seat was empty. Relief washed over me for a split second, until the door slammed shut on its own. The locks clicked, the headlights flared back on, blinding me. When they dimmed, she was behind the wheel. Her black eyes locked onto mine, her grin stretching unnaturally. "Get in," she said, her voice layered with echoes. "You're not done driving." I tried to run. My legs didn't obey. It felt like invisible hands grabbed me, dragging me back. My hand reached for the handle against my will. The door opened. I collapsed into the driver's seat. The stench of rot suffocated me. She was beside me again, perfectly still. The engine roared to life. My hands gripped the wheel. My foot pressed the gas. We drove, but I wasn't in control. My body moved like a puppet, every muscle locked. The road twisted into shapes I didn't recognize, signs warped with words I couldn't read. The trees bent inward, branches scraping the car as though reaching for me. I croaked out one word. "Why?" Her smile widened. "Because you stopped." I don't know how long I drove. Minutes? Hours? Time didn't exist anymore. The dashboard glowed faintly, but the gas gauge never dropped. The odometer spun wildly, numbers blurring into nonsense. At one point I saw something in the rearview mirror. Faces. Dozens of them. Pale, wide-eyed, mouths open in silent screams. Pressed against the back window, their hands smeared the glass with muddy prints. I tried to scream, but no sound came. Finally, the road ended, or at least it looked like it. The pavement dissolved into pure blackness, darker than night. The car drove straight into it. Her laughter filled my skull, vibrating through my bones. My chest caved inward, lungs screaming for air. The last thing I saw was her face, leaning inches from mine. Her mouth opened impossibly wide, darkness spilling out like smoke. And then nothing. Silence. But it wasn't peace. It was the silence of being buried alive. Now I don't know where I am. The dashboard still glows. My hands are still fused to the wheel. The road never ends. The humming never stops. And she's always there, always waiting, always smiling. I thought I was giving her a ride, but I was wrong. I'm the passenger now, and I always will be. They say your home is the one place you should feel safe. But I learned that night that safety is an illusion. The scariest sound I have ever heard wasn't a scream, or glass breaking, or even footsteps behind me in the dark. It was a knock. Not a friendly knock, not one in the middle of the day, a knock that came in the dead of night, when no one should have been at the door. A knock that came at the exact same time, every single night. It started 3 years ago, when I was 21. I just moved into an off-campus rental house with my 2 friends, Jake and Ryan. The house was old, cheap, and in a part of town where the streetlights barely worked. But we didn't care. The rent was low, and we were college kids trying to save money. The first 2 weeks were normal. The house was a little drafty, the floorboards creaked, and sometimes we swore we heard scratching in the walls. But that was it. Then came the first knock. It was a Tuesday night. I woke from a nightmare, sweating, and rolled over to check the clock on my nightstand. 3:15 a.m., and then knock, knock, knock. I froze. The sound was clear, slow, deliberate, 3 knocks against wood. My bedroom was near the front of the house, not far from the door. At first I thought maybe it was part of the dream or just my half-awake brain making things up. But then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. I sat up, listening hard. No footsteps, no voices, just silence. After a minute, I convinced myself it was nothing, maybe a branch against the house or some drunk kid pulling a prank. I didn't even get out of bed to check. I just stayed awake until the sun rose. The next night, nothing happened. Neither the night after that. I laughed it off, told myself I'd been imagining things. Until Saturday, 3:15 a.m. on the dot. Knock, knock, knock. This time, I crept to my window and peeked out. The porch was empty. The street was deserted, quiet under the flickering streetlight. There was no one there. I told Jake and Ryan the next morning. Jake shrugged it off. Ryan laughed and said it was probably the woods settling. But I knew what I'd heard. The following week, the knocks came back. Always at 3:15, always 3 times. Finally, on a Wednesday night, Jake texted me at 3:16. You hearing that too? My stomach dropped. I wasn't imagining it. He'd heard it too. When we checked the front door in the morning, we found something that made all of us go pale. Handprints, dozens of them, smeared across the door. Long, greasy smudges, as if someone had pressed their palms and faces against the wood over and over. We scrubbed the door clean, trying to laugh it off, but there was no denying it anymore. Something was happening. The next night, we decided to stay up together. Safety in numbers. We gathered in the living room with the lights on, playing video games, though none of us were really focused. As the minutes ticked closer to 3:15, the air in the house grew heavy. We didn't say a word, just stared at the clock. At 3:15 exactly, the knocking started. Knock, knock, knock. Jake muted the TV. Ryan whispered, "Don't answer it." The knocks came again, harder this time. Knock, knock, knock. I swallowed hard. What if it's someone who needs help? Jake shook his head. Then they can call the cops. No one good knocks at your door at 3 in the morning. The pounding grew louder. The door rattled in its frame as if someone was trying to break it down. We sat frozen, paralyzed. And then, silence. Jake, pale and trembling, crept to the door and looked through the peephole. "There's no one there," he whispered. From that night forward, the knocks never stopped. Every night at 3:15 sharp they came, sometimes soft, sometimes violent, but always there. And then the shadows started. At first, I thought I was just exhausted. I'd see something move in the corner of my vision, a tall, thin figure at the end of the hallway, a pale face in the window, gone when I blinked. But then Jake admitted he was seeing them too. One night I woke to the sound of footsteps in the hall. I held my breath, listening. They stopped right outside my bedroom door. Then came the knock. Not from the front of the house, but from inside. Knock, knock, right on my bedroom door. I stayed under the covers, paralyzed, until the sound faded. By the end of the month, none of us were sleeping. We were pale, hollow, jumping at every sound. And Ryan snapped. "Fuck this," he muttered one night as 3 a.m. approached. "I'm answering it. I don't care what's out there. I'm done hiding." We tried to stop him, but he wouldn't listen. At 3:15, the knocks came. Knock, knock, knock. Ryan stormed to the door and yanked it open. The porch was empty, but the knocks didn't stop. They were still there, loud, clear, echoing from an open doorway where no one stood. Ryan screamed and slammed the door shut. The knocking spread instantly, surrounding the house. On the walls, the floor, the ceiling, we bolted to my room, barricading the door with a dresser. The knocks followed us, circling the walls like dozens of fists hammering in unison. Then silence. We stayed awake until dawn. The next morning, Ryan was gone. His bed was made, his shoes, wallet, and phone were still there, but Ryan himself had vanished. The police searched for weeks. His family put up flyers, but no trace of him was ever found. Jake and I moved out the next day. I thought leaving the house would be the end of it. I thought maybe it was tied to that place, that whatever haunted it had taken Ryan and would leave us alone. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, in my new apartment across town, I woke in the night to silence. For a moment, I thought I was safe. Then I glanced at the clock. 3:15. Knock, knock on my bedroom door. I sat frozen, my heart thundering in my chest. I could feel it, the presence on the other side. When I finally worked up the courage to turn on the light, I saw them. Handprints. All over the inside of my bedroom door. Pale, smudged, fresh. And when I blinked, I realized they weren't just on the door. They were on the walls, the ceiling, surrounding me, closing in. That was last night. It's 3:12 now. I can already hear the faint creak of the floorboards outside my door, the shallow breath of something waiting. I know what's coming. Knock, knock, knock. If you're watching this, if you're hearing my story, whatever you do, never open the door at 3:15, because once it finds you, it never leaves, and I don't think I'll survive tonight. There's something deeply unsettling about the idea of living next to someone you can't really place. A face you've seen, a voice you've heard, but when you ask around, nobody else seems to know them. That's what happened to me the year I moved into a small rental house in a quiet suburb. I was 22, fresh out of college, working a low-paying office job, and I couldn't afford much. The house I found was old, small, but perfect for me. It was tucked at the end of a cul-de-sac, with a narrow driveway and a big oak tree shading the front porch. The landlord was eager to rent it out, almost too eager. He gave me the keys the same day I saw it, barely asked any questions. "This block is peaceful," he said. "Good neighbors, quiet nights." And he was right. The street was calm, kids riding bikes during the day, older couples tending to their gardens, the occasional barbecue smell drifting in the air. On my left lived a retired couple, Mr. and Mrs. Grant. On my right, there was a narrow, slightly crooked-looking house with peeling paint and a sagging porch. That's where I first saw him. It was my second night in the house when I stepped outside to take the trash out. That's when I noticed someone standing on the porch of the house next door. Tall, thin, a little hunched. He wore an old flannel shirt and jeans, and his skin looked pale under the dim yellow porch light. He was just watching me. I forced a smile and raised a hand. "Hey, I'm new here. Just moved in." The man didn't smile back. His head tilted slightly, like he was studying me. Then, after a long pause, he said, "Welcome." His voice was low, gravelly, like someone who hadn't spoken much in years. I waited for him to say more, but he just turned and walked inside. The whole interaction lasted less than a minute, but it left me cold. There was something about the way he looked at me. Not friendly, not curious, but like he was memorizing me. The next weekend, while chatting with Mrs. Grant, I mentioned my neighbor. "The man next door?" I asked casually. "Seems quiet. Do you know him?" Her smile faded. "Next door? Honey, that house is empty." I blinked. "No, it's not. I saw him. We talked." She shook her head firmly. "That house has been vacant for years. The owner passed away, and no one ever bought it. Place is falling apart. Nobody lives there." I laughed awkwardly, thinking maybe she just didn't know. But when I asked around, everyone said the same thing. No one had a neighbor on that side. After that, I started noticing him more often. Sometimes I'd catch him standing in his yard at night, perfectly still, staring at my house. Sometimes I'd see him at his window when I pulled into my driveway, his pale face barely visible through the glass. One evening, as I carried groceries inside, I heard his voice behind me. "Need help with those?" I spun around. He was standing at the edge of my driveway, closer than I'd ever seen him. His eyes were pale gray, almost colorless. "I'm fine," I stammered. He smiled faintly, but it wasn't a warm smile, more like a reflex, like he was imitating something he'd seen other people do. Then he said something that chilled me. "You shouldn't stay here too long." Before I could respond, he turned and walked back into his house. Only, when I looked later, his front door was boarded shut. Things escalated quickly after that. Late at night, around 2 or 3 a.m., I'd hear knocking on my walls. Always on the side closest to his house. Knock, knock, knock. Sometimes soft, sometimes hard enough to rattle picture frames. When I got brave enough to look outside, his house was dark. No lights, no movement. But the knocking wouldn't stop until just before dawn. I stopped sleeping well. Every creak of the house made me tense. I started leaving lights on, double-checking locks. And then one night I woke to find him standing in my backyard. I saw him through the blinds, tall, motionless, head tilted toward my bedroom window, just watching. By the time I grabbed my phone to call someone, he was gone. I confronted my landlord about it. "Look," I said, "you didn't tell me the house next door was occupied." He frowned. "It's not." "Yes, it is. I've seen him, spoken to him. He comes into my yard." The landlord went pale. "Don't talk to him," he said quickly. "Don't acknowledge him. Just ignore it." My blood ran cold. "So you know who I'm talking about?" The landlord looked down at his hands. "Some houses hold on to people. You'll understand." And then he refused to say more. The next week was hell. I'd hear footsteps pacing along the wall I shared with his house. I'd hear whispers in the night, faint like they were coming through the vents. And then came the night I woke up to find him in my kitchen. I heard the refrigerator door close, faint footsteps on the tile. When I crept to the doorway, heart hammering, he was standing there, staring at me. Up close, his skin looked almost translucent, stretched too thin over his bones. His eyes were sunken, lifeless. "You shouldn't stay here," he repeated softly. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then in a blink, he was gone. No sound, no door opening, just gone. I decided I was leaving. I packed bags, called out of work, and told myself I'd be gone by morning. But that night, at exactly 3:15 a.m., I woke to the sound of my front door creaking open. My stomach dropped. I knew I'd locked it. From the dark hallway came slow, dragging footsteps. I grabbed my phone, but the screen was dead. No power. The footsteps grew louder, closer. And then I heard it. His voice, right outside my bedroom. "You shouldn't have stayed." The knob turned slowly. The door creaked open, and standing there was my neighbor, pale and smiling. Only it wasn't just him. Behind him, filling the hallway, were dozens of figures. Gray-skinned, hollow-eyed, all watching me. I screamed. The last thing I remember was the sound of them stepping into my room. I don't know who will find this, but if you ever move into a quiet neighborhood and the house next door looks empty, don't believe it. Some neighbors never leave, and some will come looking for company. Windows are supposed to let light in, give you a view of the world outside, connect you to life beyond your walls. For me, my bedroom window became something else entirely. A reminder that sometimes when you look out into the night, something might already be looking back. I never believed in ghost stories or horror tales. I liked scary movies, sure, but I always thought they were exaggerated. Evil spirits, cursed objects, killers who never sleep. All nonsense. But what happened to me last winter changed that. It made me understand that some horrors don't hide in haunted houses or forests miles away. Some horrors wait just beyond the thin pane of glass that separates you from the night. And once you see them, they never leave. It started when I moved into a small house on the outskirts of town. It wasn't much, 2 bedrooms, creaky floors, and a draft that seeped through the walls in December. But it was cheap, and after losing my roommate, I needed something I could afford alone. The first week was uneventful. Work, groceries, nights spent unpacking boxes while the wind whistled outside. My bedroom faced the backyard, and at night I would sometimes stand at the window, sipping tea, staring at the trees swaying under the moon. It was quiet, peaceful, until it wasn't. The first time I saw him, I thought my eyes were playing tricks. It was around 11 p.m. I'd just brushed my teeth and walked back into my room. As I passed the window, something made me glance outside. There, at the edge of the yard near the tree line, stood a man. He wasn't moving, just standing perfectly still, facing my house. Even though it was dark, I could make out his shape, tall, lean, shoulders slouched forward. His head was slightly tilted, like he was curious, or maybe studying me. I froze, toothbrush still in my hand. We stared at each other, or at least I thought we did. I couldn't see his eyes, but I felt them on me. My logical brain kicked in. Probably some drunk who wandered into the wrong yard, or maybe a neighbor cutting through. But then why was he just standing there? I stood at the window for a full minute, waiting for him to move. He didn't. Finally, I closed the blinds, heart pounding. When I peeked again a minute later, he was gone. I told myself it was nothing, that I was overtired, that maybe I imagined him. But deep down I knew I hadn't. The next night, he was there again. Same spot, same posture, same eerie stillness. Only this time he was closer. Not at the tree line, but halfway into the yard. I shut the blinds immediately, but I couldn't sleep. Every sound made me flinch. At 2 a.m. I checked again. He was gone. On the third night, he stood at the edge of my porch. That's when I stopped telling myself it was my imagination. He was real. I called the police. When the officer arrived, I explained what I'd seen. He shined a flashlight through the yard, checked the tree line, even walked the perimeter. Nothing. No footprints in the snow, no broken branches, no sign of anyone being there. "Probably some animal you mistook for a person," he said. "An animal?" I snapped. "Animals don't stand still for 20 minutes staring at your window." He gave me a tired look. If he comes back, call us again. Lock your doors. Don't panic." And that was that. He left, and I was alone again. The fourth night was worse. I'd been trying to convince myself not to look, to just keep the blinds closed. But curiosity won. I peeked, and he was right there. Not in the yard, not by the porch, at the window. His face pressed against the glass, pale skin stretched tight over sharp cheekbones, lips curved into the faintest smile. His eyes were wide, unblinking, staring straight into mine. I screamed and stumbled back, nearly tripping over my bed. My heart hammered so loud I thought it would burst. When I dared to look again, he was gone. The next morning, when daylight gave me the courage, I checked outside. No footprints in the snow beneath my window. Nothing. It was impossible. He'd been there, inches away from me. After that, sleep became a memory. Every night I heard things, faint tapping on the glass, the creak of the porch, whispers I couldn't make out. I stopped opening the blinds altogether, too afraid of what I'd see. But I could feel him, that presence, watching. One night, I thought I heard breathing, not my own, but low, raspy breathing, just outside the window. I lay frozen in bed, too terrified to move, staring at the ceiling while my body shook. By morning, I was pale, exhausted, barely functioning at work. My coworkers noticed, but I couldn't explain. Who would believe me? I called my landlord, demanding to know if the house had some kind of history, if anyone had ever reported break-ins. He paused, then said carefully, "Nobody lasts long in that house." When I pressed, he hung up. That night, I nailed the blinds shut, moved my bed to the opposite wall, left every light on. But at 3:15 a.m., I woke to the sound of tapping. Not at the window, at the glass of the picture frame on the wall above my bed. Tap, tap, tap. I stared in horror as the frame rattled slightly, though there was no draft, no reason for it to move. And then I realized the picture frame was reflecting the window behind me. I forced myself to look, and in the reflection I saw him, his face at the glass, smiling. I knew then that it wasn't just a man. Men leave footprints. Men can be caught. Men don't vanish the second you look away. Whatever this thing was, it wanted me. On the final night, I tried to stay awake. I sat in bed with every light on, phone in hand, watching the hours crawl by. Midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. At 3, I heard it. The window sliding open. Slowly, carefully. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Then came the sound of a footstep on the wooden floor, inside my room. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying I was dreaming, that it was sleep paralysis. But then I felt it. Cold fingers brushing against my face. I opened my eyes. He was leaning over me, impossibly close, his smile wider than before, teeth sharp and yellow. His eyes glowed faintly in the dark. "You looked," he whispered. His breath was rancid, rotten. I tried to scream, but his hand clamped over my mouth. His skin was icy, rough, almost decayed. The last thing I saw was his face filling my vision, his mouth opening unnaturally wide, impossibly wide. And then darkness. They say the house is empty now. Neighbors tell each other stories about the tenant who vanished, about the strange noises at night, the pale face sometimes seen in the window. But I know the truth. I never left. I'm still there, and so is he. If you ever walk by that house and feel the urge to look at the window, don't. Because once you see him, he'll see you too. And he never stops watching. Being home alone doesn't usually bother me. I've always thought of myself as independent, rational. I don't spook easily. But what happened to me last winter destroyed that belief. It started on a Friday night. My parents had gone out of town for the weekend, leaving me with the house to myself. I was 17, excited to finally have some freedom. I ordered pizza, stayed up late watching movies, and let the TV fill the empty silence of the house. Everything felt normal, safe, until the noises started. It was close to midnight. I had just finished cleaning up the pizza box when I heard it, a faint creak from upstairs. I froze. The house was old and it made sounds sometimes, but this one was different. It was slow, deliberate, like weight shifting on a floorboard. I told myself it was nothing, probably the wood settling, or maybe the wind. But the longer I stood there holding my breath, the more I realized it hadn't sounded random. It had sounded like footsteps. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen drawer and forced myself to check upstairs. Room by room, light by light, I searched. My parents' room, empty. Bathroom, empty. Guest room, empty. Nothing. By the time I got back downstairs, I felt stupid. jumping at shadows, clutching a knife like some horror movie cliché. I laughed at myself, turned off the lights, and went back to the living room. That's when I heard the second noise. This time, it was the sound of the back door. A soft click like the handle being tried. My heart skipped. I turned off the TV, letting the silence swallow the room. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, the handle jiggled again. Slowly. Testing. Someone was trying to get in. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police, but then the sound stopped. After a long pause, I crept to the window and peeked out into the backyard. Nothing. No movement, no shadows. Just the empty yard bathed in pale moonlight. I backed away, locking the door just to be safe. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe some drunk neighbor. That's what I told myself. But deep down, I didn't believe it. I sat back down, knife still in my hand, trying to calm down. Minutes dragged by. Then came the third noise. Not upstairs, not at the door, inside. From the kitchen. I held my breath, straining my ears. It was faint but unmistakable. The sound of something dragging across the floor, like footsteps. Slow, deliberate. I wanted to believe I was imagining it, but the creaks grew louder, closer, until I knew someone was in the kitchen. I dialed 911, whispering to the operator that someone had broken in. She told me to stay calm, stay quiet, and that officers were on the way. I crouched behind the couch, heart hammering, knife shaking in my grip. The footsteps stopped. For a moment, the house was deathly silent. Then slowly I heard breathing. Not mine, heavy, wet, rasping, coming from the kitchen doorway. I peeked around the couch, expecting to see a burglar, but what I saw wasn't human. It was tall, unnaturally tall, its head nearly brushing the doorway. Its body was thin, stretched, skin a sickly gray. Its arms were too long, hanging almost to the floor, ending in claw-like fingers. And its face was wrong. No nose, no ears, just two deep, sunken eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. Its mouth was wide, too wide, stretching ear to ear, filled with jagged, uneven teeth. It stood there, staring, breathing. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The operator on the phone was asking if I was safe, but I couldn't answer. I could barely move. The thing tilted its head, studying me like a predator sizing up prey. Then, slowly, it stepped forward. I bolted. Knife in one hand, phone in the other, I sprinted up the stairs, slamming my bedroom door shut and locking it. My hands shook so hard I could barely hold the phone. The operator's voice came through again, telling me officers were minutes away. Then I heard it. The thing's footsteps on the stairs. Slow, heavy, closer. I grabbed my dresser and shoved it against the door, heart racing. For a moment, silence. Then, scratch, scratch. The sound of claws dragging across the wood. I backed into the corner, knife trembling in my hand. The operator was telling me to stay calm, but her voice felt a million miles away. The scratching stopped, then came the whisper. Right outside the door, "You're alone." The voice was low, guttural, almost mocking. I covered my ears, shaking my head, no, no, no. But the voice came again. "You're mine." Desperate, I opened my window, planning to climb onto the roof. The cold night air rushed in, burning my lungs. As I swung one leg out, I heard it, the lock on my door snapping. The dresser screeched as it was pushed aside. I turned just in time to see the door creak open, and there it was. Filling the doorway, hunched, its glowing eyes locked on me, its mouth stretched into that impossible grin. I climbed onto the roof, slipping on the frost, scrambling like a trapped animal. Behind me, the thing crawled out of the window. It moved wrong, its limbs bending at unnatural angles, body contorting like it had no bones. It scuttled onto the roof like a spider, claws scraping against the shingles. I ran, heart in my throat, leaping onto the lower roof of the porch. Pain shot through my legs as I landed hard. I looked up and it was there, crouched above me, grinning. I hit the ground running, sprinting across the yard toward the street. Red and blue lights flashed in the distance. The police were here. Relief surged through me. I turned back once. The thing was gone. 2 officers rushed toward me, asking if I was okay. I tried to explain, gasping, crying, pointing toward the house. They searched. Top to bottom, nothing. No broken locks, no scratches on the door, no sign of forced entry. And when they checked my phone records, there was no call to 911. They left after assuring me it was all in my head. But I know the truth, because now, every night, I hear it. The slow creak of footsteps, the rasp of breathing, the whisper at my door. You're alone. And one night soon, when I can't run anymore, it's gonna come in, and I won't be able to stop it.